Alrighty guys, welcome back to the show. So for today, I decided to test out a bunch of different ways to approach build orders, prioritizing mass, keeping your comm in your base, not building an air factory and focusing on land, etc. so that we can look at the results from these different approaches. While some of the orders that I tested are objectively worse than others, I'm not really looking to find an optimal build order here, but I'm more trying to highlight some decently large differences that decision making can make within the first 10 minutes of the game. So your decision whether to upgrade a mechs early versus focus on additional land spam has huge ramifications in how much mass you actually can accrue and how many units you can actually field during a game. So with that, let's get into it. Okay, so before we get into the actual sequences, we need to actually set some ground rules here to make sure that we're being as consistent as possible. So firstly, the results that you're seeing are rounded averages of a couple of different runs of each sequence to try and eliminate myself from the equation as much as possible because I am a human and I'm going to do things at different paces. Second thing, we're going to be using the same map every single time. Third, I am gathering reclaim, but I am trying to limit reclaim to a realistic area on the map as much as possible. Fourth, we're building the exact same number of mechs every time. Fifth, we're building the same number of engineers every time. And lastly, all factories must be active at all times. So the only things we're really manipulating here are the priorities of where our mass and energy goes. And we'll be measuring a couple of different things. How many resources each sequence allows us to collect within the first 10 minutes of a game, how many units we're able to build, how many mechs we could upgrade to Tech 2, how many mass storage we could build around said upgraded mechs, and if we were able to jump to a new tech level, how much were we able to use it in the first 10 minutes. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the results. Now, I tried to roadmap things as best as I could out in a doc, so if you're interested in looking at my script to see the exact roadmap I was following, I'll publish a Google Doc and link it down in the description below. Or if you're just curious to see how I actually write out my script, you can see that too, because I'll post this up there. I don't think there's anything incriminating in here or anything like that. But our first sequence is going to start with land factories before mechs upgrades. It allows them to be built concurrently though at the same time. So we're going to have engineers that are upgrading mass extractors at the same time that we're building Tech 1 land factories to flood the map with as much spam as possible and hopefully get an edge on our opponent. We are going to be walking our comm forward in this one to an expansion, and in that expansion we're going to be setting up the 3 mechs there, as well as a forward factory that we can use for reclaim or for additional units, which I believe is a pretty good practice in games. And the results are that, we get a gun upgrade, we have 5 T2 mechs, 6 mass storage. As far as land units go, we were able to produce 54 Mantis, 7 Sky Slammers, 5 Scouts, and 15 Medusa. Air units, we got 2 Air Scouts and 10 Interceptors. We are 87% completed on a Tech 2 land upgrade here, and final resource collection is 17,000 mass collected and 160,000 energy, with energy here actually being our primary limiting factor, as we were stalling for multiple points through this actual build order. Sequence number 2 is going to focus on 2 mechs upgrades before we build additional land factories. We're going to build and we are also going to build 8 additional power generators. We are again walking our comm forward in this scenario, so by and large everything stays the same. The only thing that we're doing is, instead of allowing these land factories that are going to be producing spam units to be built concurrently with mechs upgrades, we're going to focus on getting 2 Tech 2 mass extractors first. Then we're going to build our land factories, and we'll have some engineers that are also assisting mechs upgrades at the same time. So prioritizing mass a little bit more in this particular scenario rather than getting spam out as quickly as we can. And our results are, we have 5.5 mechs upgrades this time, 8 mass storage. We do complete a gun upgrade. We also complete a Tech 2 factory. We get 2 Tech 2 engineers, and we are 16% completed on a Tech 2 PGen, which would be the first thing that I build out of a Tech 2 factory, assuming I'm not under a whole lot of pressure. We were also able to afford an additional land factory, and we didn't really sacrifice any Tech 1 unit production, with very similar numbers to test number 1. The only difference might be how soon we were actually able to get those units out. For final resource counts, we've got 19,600 mass collected with 211,000 energy. So like 33% more energy that is actually produced, and a modest mass upgrade at about 2,500 mass additional, which is not insignificant. For sequence number 3, what we're going to do is we're going to keep a lot of the same stuff from our build order number 2, but in this instance, we're going to actually keep the commander in the base and use our commander's build power to assist additional power instead of expanding to that 3 mechs expansion, and we'll be letting an engineer do that expansion instead. So our results are keeping the comm in the base to build additional P-gens does sacrifice a couple of things. We do lose a little bit of our Tech 1 land production, so we've only produced 48 Mantis instead of the 50s instead of the mid 50s on the Mantis production. We did complete a Tech 2 Tech 2 upgrade. We did finish our commander's gun, and we produced 1 Tech 2 engineer. So not quite as good as the last test. The additional power, though, did allow us to build 1 additional Tech 2 mechs. So instead of 5, we are now at 6. And we were at a similar amount of mass storage from the previous test. So right about 8 mass storage. But even with the additional Tech 2 mechs, we were only at 18,000 mass produced. But we did make more energy at 220,000. If I had to guess, it's because having the commander assisting power in the initial phases of the game siphoned off a lot of the mass that we would use for that initial Tech 2 upgrade to kind of jumpstart our Tech 2 mechs economy. Siphoned off a lot of the mass away from that and sent it to build power. So sacrificing some mass there in order to actually get power. But once our economy was rolling, I would argue that it was actually in a healthier state than in the previous test, because we were at 6 Tech 2 mexes. So even though we were a little bit behind at 10 minutes, it would not have taken us as long to catch up to some of the other build orders. Now, sequence number 4, we're actually going to remove the air factory entirely, replace it with a land factory, and we're going to focus entirely on land production. We're also going to put a little less priority on power generators, building only the first hydro and then 9 P-gens without the additional 8 P-gens in a line from the earlier sequences. I've also adjusted the order, so instead of going for 4 P-gens and then an air factory, we're going to be building 2 and then our first land factory. So our results from this, we obviously produced more land units. So we had more land factories, so we produced more land units. We had 66 Mantis, 17 Medusa, 9 Sky Slammers and Scouts, no air units for obvious reasons. We did complete the gun upgrade, but you definitely need more energy in this build to help that. So instead of 9, probably looking at 13 P-gens after your hydro would probably be the sweet spot there. We've got 5 Tech 2 mexes, very similar to our first test, 10 mass storage in this particular instance, and then an 86% on the Tech 2 land upgrade. So for final resource count is actually our lowest at about 17,000 mass and 166,000 energy. So obviously going for the land unit and then beginning unit production early, especially because land units are a little bit more mass expensive than air units, hurt our early initial T2 upgrade on the mechs. So again, that initial mechs upgrading to Tech 2, very crucial for jumpstarting kind of your wave of Tech 2 mexes in your economy, and having that land factory producing units as early as it was siphoned mass away from what was otherwise a pretty fledgling economy. So unlike my previous science videos, in conclusion, where I would rank these build orders, this is much more to just illustrate the differences between opening sequences, how your decisions kind of impact the way that the game actually works. So on the higher side, we had almost 20,000 mass that was collected. And on the lower side, we had a low 17,000 mass that was collected within the same amount of time, where the only thing that we're really changing here is the order in which we're actually building something. So I'm not necessarily going to rank these opening sequences, because all of these sequences would play out differently after the first 10 minutes, where one sequence might do really well, one sequence might do well in a 40-minute game, others might do well in a 20-minute game. So I'm not going to rank these. This is purely an illustration of how this actually works. The other thing to note is that this is a highly prescriptive approach, and this level of rigidity probably shouldn't be followed in an actual game because you need to learn to adapt on the fly. So Tech 1 bomber shows up out of nowhere. What do? Do you just let it kill engineers? No, you've got to shift a land factory to produce some MAA, or you've got to rush out a first interceptor or build a static AA. Static AA is probably your worst option, but you've got to learn to adapt on the fly, and any adaptation that you make to these build orders is going to throw things off. So important thing to note here is that being highly prescriptive with your build orders is not necessarily the best way to approach a game. You need to be ready to adapt to things on the fly as they actually happen. And for the last thing, while I'm doing my testing, so I was doing this testing on Saturday afternoon over this weekend, I'm doing it online. Like, I don't really hide anything. And normally I have people reach out and ask what I'm actually testing, because apparently you guys like these videos for some reason, even though I'm just an idiot with a calculator sometimes. But whenever I told them, one in particular, I think had some good recommendations that I wanted to include. He's a good player. He's better than me. Definitely better than me. So firstly, the first recommendation that this guy had was, even if you plan to drop, so if you plan to drop a plateau or a mechs expansion that's a long way away, you should still build a land factory first for engineer production, just because you need to have multiple factories. So you can get the engineers that are continuous out of your land factory while getting your air factory up and then going for a transport. According to him, I haven't actually tested this, but if you time it, it's really about the same. It's about the same level of time, but your economy is in a better shape in your base if you have that land factory producing engineers. Second, always check reclaim on the map. Always check reclaim on the map. More reclaim means that you need to build more power. Maps like DeRosa Sanctuary or Bermuda Locket have so much reclaim on them that you can often get away with not building a mechs for the first few minutes and only focusing on power. I did a replay review a while back. I can link it down in the description if you missed it, on a ladder match that I played against somebody, and he went for a much more traditional opening with, you know, factory 2P gens, 3 mexes, 4P gens, you know, kind of a more traditional no hydro opening. And I didn't build a single mex for the first like 3 to 4 minutes of the game and focused only on reclaim and building power. And I ended up winning the game with a healthier economy. So adapting to the map in that way is also very, very important. So always check reclaim. Lastly, mass income is a logarithmic function. The earlier you can get a mex upgrade without losing map control, the better. Every mex upgrade means that your next upgrade is inherently going to be easier. That's why I kept talking about that initial T2 mex that can jumpstart your move to a Tech 2 mex economy. That first Tech 2 mex is very, very important. And the earlier you can get that, the earlier you can start moving to an entire Tech 2 mass extractor economy. And the same is true for Tech 3. The earlier you can get a Tech 3 mex without losing map control or your commander, the better off you're going to be, because this mass income scale works in a very logarithmic fashion where it feeds off itself and feeds off itself and feeds off itself. So with that, I'll leave you guys to it. Hopefully this helped a little bit. Hopefully this was educational, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.